That's all it was a dream.
It's different from at home, but good.
Hello and thanks for joining us for our weekly film show. The site of Paris's Notre-Dame Cathedral on fire shocked the world in April 2 years ago. Now leading French director Jean-Jacques Annaud is making a film about it. He's shooting in Burgundy, eastern France, with the cathedral Saint-Étienne de Sens standing in for Notre Dame. Emerald Maxwell reports.
The fire alarm sends 100 or so tourists running out of the cathedral. The scene isn't taking place in Paris this time, but in Sens in Burgundy, and is being directed by Jean-Jacques Annaud. Less than 2 years after the dramatic pictures of Notre-Dame burning shocked the world, the director's committing the story to film. He conceived of the project the very night of the fire.
I said to myself, this is hellish. But it's also incredibly spectacular and moving. It touches our souls. There's this beauty, this symbol that's disappearing, while the whole world cries. 3 days later, I was writing.
120 actors and extras of various nationalities are on set.
Attention, on va avoir des caméras qui vont être relativement proches de vos visages. Personne ne sourit, on n'est pas dans un truc rigolo.
They're playing the cathedral's very last visitors.
It's a great experience for us. It allows us to see how filming works. It's impressive.
Hearing the alarm going off like that helps to build the atmosphere for us. Even though we know that despite everything, Notre Dame is still standing, it's still very moving.
Notre Dame herself may be out of action, but no matter. The Saint-Étienne de Sens, in fact, heavily inspired the younger Parisian cathedral.
The rib vault, the sexpartite vault, it could be Sens or Paris. And Jean-Jacques Annaud also thought that the tiles resembled those of Notre-Dame. He really liked the entrance to the cathedral at ground level, and of course the attic, the framework, the forest are all still intact here.
To complete the illusion, stagehands have placed the final details. 400 chairs identical to those of Notre-Dame have been built for the shoot, which will wrap at the end of the month in Sens. The fire itself will be filmed a few weeks later at a studio outside Paris.
Well, we're joined now by our film critic Lisa Nesselson, who's in the streets of Paris, not far from Notre Dame. Now, Lisa, is Jean-Jacques Annaud a good choice to bring this true story to the big screen?
Well, France tends to make way fewer films about real-life events than the English-speaking world does. And I think Annaud is an excellent choice for this because he's very good at tackling big stories full of technical challenges and telling them clearly and creatively for general audiences. Chances are you've seen a few of his films since he has worked extensively in both French and English. He was lucky enough to win an Oscar for his very first feature film, Black and White in Color, in 1976. And as if getting in some practice for this new film, he made use of his lifelong fascination with medieval churches when he directed In the Name of the Rose, starring Sean Connery in 1986. The Bear in 1988 posed shooting challenges that would now be handled via digital effects. And in 1997, his 7 Years in Tibet starred Brad Pitt as a real-life Austrian mountaineer buffeted by World War II, who, among other things, ended up as a tutor for the Dalai Lama. I think Annaud is a terrific choice to take us inside the fire at Notre Dame without breathing lead particles, which I'm pretty sure I breathe since I live not far from the cathedral.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing it. Next, a new documentary aims to tell the unheard story of the tragic rapper Christopher Wallace, more famously known as the Notorious B.I.G. He was murdered at the age of 24 in Los Angeles, and on the 24th anniversary of his death, Biggie, I Got a Story to Tell, is on Netflix. What did you think of it, Lisa?
Well, I knew next to nothing about the rapper called the Notorious B.I.G., except as the jokey inspiration for calling Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg the Notorious R.B.G. And you know what? After watching this film, alas, I still don't know much. Brooklyn-born Christopher Wallace, first known as Biggie Smalls and then Biggie, was shot and killed at age 24 in a still unsolved drive-by shooting. Now, the 2 albums he made have sold 30 million copies, and I have no idea why, but then I'm not the typical consumer of so-called gangster rap. Biggie's own mother, a teacher who is one of the most eloquent interviewees here, is quite clear that she only listened to each of his albums once, and that sufficed. A childhood friend of Biggie's had the foresight to shoot tons of video footage of Biggie and his crew, so we have visuals from the 1980s. Not all that interesting, but authentic. His funeral procession was such an event that there's aerial news footage of it.
Okay, well, let's take a look at Biggie.
Big had a gifted talent that saved a lot of people's lives, but his.
We're just gonna do our thing forever, forever and ever. And if you don't know, now you know.
Now, the importance of precisely which block in Brooklyn you grow up on, and so what street corner you hung out on, is emphasized with lots and lots of maps. Puff Daddy P. Diddy Sean Combs, an executive producer here, says that being from Harlem and Manhattan, he couldn't just go to Brooklyn because, quote, you'd get robbed. Christopher's single mom, who says she likes country western music and ballads, took him back to her native Jamaica every year, where he absorbed musical influences. And his 96-year-old grandmother, who still lives in Jamaica, tells us she turned on the TV one day to news that her grandson had been shot dead. His mom endeavored to raise him right, but in the 1980s, selling crack was just way too lucrative to pass up. Very young men knew that that path led to prison or to death, but they took it anyway. He's been called the greatest rapper who ever lived. This doc didn't really help me understand why.
You have to listen to some of his music after the show, Lisa. Next to the world's most important co-production and pitching event for European animated feature films, Cartoon Movie usually takes place in Bordeaux, but this year it was entirely online. Tell us about Cartoon Movie, Lisa.
Well, 55 projects for feature-length animated movies were presented this year from 16 European countries. French producers brought the most projects by far, 21. And in the top 10 projects that received the most attention from digital attendees, well, 9 were French. But it truly is a showcase for European talents. After France, the countries that brought the most projects are Spain, Denmark, Germany, Romania, and Italy. Now, what do I mean by project? Well, it takes a long time, years and years, to create an animated feature. Cartoon Movie welcomes 3 steps along the way: raw ideas in search of funding, projects that are in production but looking for co-producers and distribution, and finished films, usually movies we've been watching take shape for several years. Europeans would seem to have high hopes for the future of animation because participation in Cartoon Movie was up 20.3% over last year, 479 companies from 45 countries, and almost half the participants, from animators to buyers, were women.
What stood out for you?
Well, Your Spotted Skin is an unnerving twist on talking animals. The official description tells us that while stressing out over her final exams, Antonia the cow meets the night watchman, Kurt the lion. They fall in love, but their relationship is met with great skepticism by the world around them. Antonia's farm animal roommates have little time for these predatory posers from the wild, while Kurt's pride still view themselves as the kings of the jungle, and they can't understand why he'd choose a cow as a partner. When a sheep goes missing, suspicion falls on the carnivorous Kurt. And French animator Pierre Foldes is in production on Blind Willow Sleeping Woman, adapted from short stories by Haruki Murakami. Now, animation can really depict the author's gifts for magic realism. Giant talking frog, earthquake, evil trees. You've come to the right place.
Okay, well, let's take a look at Blind Willow Sleeping Woman.
She just watches TV. It's as though I don't exist.
I don't know where they are. Nobody can tell me anything.
I'm never coming back.
Maybe she was taken by a UFO.
What's the most painful thing that's ever happened to you?
to me.
That was one of Lisa's highlights from Cartoon Movie. Now out this week in France on DVD and Blu-ray is The Addiction. Lisa, tell us about Abel Ferrara's 1995 philosophical horror tale.
Well, not unlike Jean-Jacques Annaud, who we mentioned earlier, American independent filmmaker Abel Ferrara has made movies with actors about real-life subjects, such as Pier Paolo Pasolini in Pasolini, and Dominique Strauss-Kahn and Anne Sinclair in Welcome to New York. Now, The Addiction is a work of the imagination, but it rings disconcertingly true. It's an unnerving, modern vampire film shot in evocative black and white. New York doctoral student in philosophy Kathleen, played by Lily Taylor, is bitten by a woman and is soon addicted to human blood. I hate when that happens. Like one of my favorite movies, The Hunger, in which Catherine Deneuve and David Bowie play Manhattan vampires, this shows New York as an ideal setting for the undead in search of blood. You can look at it as an allegory for addiction, complete with sin and possible redemption, or you can just enjoy the sexy and unnerving tale about the lure of the forbidden and whether a PhD in philosophy is of any use if the wrong person bites you on the neck. This restored edition contains a wealth of terrific bonus material.
Okay, Lisa Nesselson, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to leave you with a taste of addiction. Remember our website, we're also on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.